Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to present to this group, this network, which has been going for 6-7 years. It's a privilege to talk to you, to present to you about the work that we've been doing in innovation and technology for the International ALS MND Alliance. I'm Jarnail Chudge. I'm a design, innovation, technology strategist at the Alliance. And separately, I'm also a honorary professor of practice in artificial intelligence and accessibility at University College London. I got involved working with ALS MND when I was part of Microsoft research, and I was at Microsoft for 20 years, the last 10 years of which were spent in research. And my introduction to working in accessibility and inclusive design started from a project that look to use 3D sound for people who are blind or have low vision in order to make navigation around the world easier. And as I got more involved in that, we were then moved into a small team that was also responsible for Windows eye control. And through them, although I'm based in the UK, I got introduced to the work that they were doing with the ALS MND community and have been working closely with the Alliance, initially as a volunteer on the Information and Technology Advisory Council since 2019. And then on leaving Microsoft about 3 years ago, I've been supporting the Alliance on a number of projects, some of which I'll talk about today. So from the Alliance point of view, you may be aware that over the last 5-6 years, we carry out every 2 years what we call the Fundamental Rights Survey, which allows us to basically engage with and canvass the global community of Alliance member organizations in order to get a sense of, I guess, what's top of mind in terms of quality of life, in terms of the standard of care, the quality of care they're getting, what their day-to-day lived experience is like. And the most recent one that we did, the most recent one that we did was last year. But the one before that was 2023. And one of the questions that we asked was, what access to technology do you have? And we can see from the chart here on the right that mobile phone is clearly the technology or the device that people around the world have most common access to, closely followed by having access to a computer, a PC, laptop, desktop of some kind. And we can see that there are regional variations around the globe in some of the more analysis that we've done. For example, we know that when it comes to using tablet devices, sensors around the home, for example, that they're much more available and accessible in the global north than they are in the south. Now, for us, from the Alliance point of view, the relationship between the fundamental rights and innovation and technology is how can we use technology to help deliver or support the right to the highest quality of life. Now, when we talk about technology, we don't just talk about computing technology or machines or devices. We talk about, in addition to the digital experience, what maybe people are using in their day-to-day lives which they wouldn't consider technology, or what are the other aspects of day-to-day life which make quality of life such an important part of a person's lived experience. Clearly, people use devices, but over here, and Pablo, you will recognize all of the folks in the picture here. We have Leanne on the right-hand side, who's using basically one of a stocking to keep her head in position when she's on her wheelchair. And then on the left-hand side, we have Gudjon, who talks about the importance of family. And here he is with his grandchildren as being such a key component of quality of life for him. And then we've got Steve there in the back, just basically using a ramp to get his wheelchair in and out of the house. So for us, technology is a combination of analog and digital technologies. And much of the work that we've been doing at the Alliance is really stemmed from a set of personas that were developed in 2018, 2019 by ALS Canada. So we have Steve, who's newly diagnosed, Moira, who has slow progressing symptoms, Fred, who has more advanced and changing symptoms of ALS, and then Henry is their caregiver. And we'll share all these slides afterwards, so don't worry about, I'm not going to read every word here, but as we continued within the Alliance to do our work, in particular over the last 2 or 3 years, how can technologies which have been accessible and available in Europe, in North America, Australasia, Japan, for example, what would it take to make those technologies more available, more accessible, affordable in the global south, in low middle income countries as well, in order to support the quality of life goal that we have? So some of the text that you see here on green has been added to enrich these personas from that global perspective because of the work that we've done in Colombia, working very closely also with Pablo and other associations in Latin America, Africa, and Asia as well. And this is something that we are always continuing to look at how we can enhance and enrich from a global perspective. So, for example, we have now included the importance of socio-cultural aspects of the person's lived experience and how families or intergenerational support networks play such an important role in many countries around the world. But once again, how regulatory conditions, requirements are very, very different, how the infrastructure in one place can support something or in another place constrain something. From a personal perspective, my approach to technology has always been, how can it support a person rather than, oh, here we've got some really nice, cool, interesting technology, and let's just sort of play with it. Our goal has always been technology needs to fulfill a purpose in terms of making a difference to a person's lived experience. And I have a background in design, and one of the things that I always do is try to think about the end-to-end experience of the people who the technology is ultimately designed for. And when it came to ALS MND, one of the things that we've sort of established as a framework is the life course journey. And this is intended to be purely for illustration, to help us sort of understand the different stages of the experience that a person goes through, all the way from initial symptoms, to diagnosis, learning about ALS MND, which is where a lot of the engagement with professionals starts to happen, to then start thinking about or looking at where and how technology can make a difference. And once you've sort of started to incorporate that into your day-to-day life, how then can it be extended to the day-to-day life, the normal everyday routines that you have, and support those better? And whether that's to do with the relationships that you have with family and friends, what gives you meaning and purpose in your life, the desire to give something back to the community, legacy, and so on. And the dashed line at the top is intended to sort of illustrate the positive impact that technology has the potential to have. And the objective, the goal always is, how can we make sure that we take the experience above the neutral line and add and incorporate positive aspects to a person's experience? Also, over the last few years, and I think this was back in 2022, one of the I guess, ideas that we introduced to the picture of a person's lived experience was Maslow's hierarchy of needs framework. And here we're using the 8-level model, which at the bottom starts with physiological safety, looking after a person, the care and treatment, before we then start to move into the more emotional aspects of a person's lived experience around love and belonging, self-esteem, and so on, all the way through to then finding individual meaning, purpose in life. And this is really summed up in this wonderful quote from Bernice Yu, who was a colleague of mine at Microsoft, actually, where she described it as to live is not just to have my physical needs met and to be able to breathe. It's the other way round for her in terms of Maslow's hierarchy. For Bernice, she described the ability to be able to love, to have belonging, esteem, to be able to contribute. That's what quality of life is for her. And that's certainly something that is strongly influencing the work and the position that we have at the Alliance. And I'll let this slide just play through. So this was a matrix that we put together. We call it the needs matrix or the patient needs matrix, which takes the 8 levels of Maslow's framework. It then breaks them into subcategories. So, for example, when it comes to physiology, it's to do with hygiene, breathing, nutrition, safety, for example, could include from a technology point of view, things like wearables, telehealth, esteem could include communication control and so on. And what we then did was to take each of those personas and then start to populate the different cells to see which sort of technologies are making a difference or fall into that particular area for that particular person. And this included, obviously wearables like smartwatches, all the way through to an ankle support brace, which is available in many places, for example. The idea here is that it gives us a sense of not only some of the technologies that are being developed, but some of the technologies that people are using, or some of the innovations that people are taking inspiration from and adapting to their particular needs as well. And the columns here, G, I, and A, represent, once again, it's not scientific, it's purely subjective in terms of global coverage or global availability and accessibility. I stands for industry, both in terms of technology companies, organizations, groups, etc., that are working in this space. And A is for academic research, where is a lot of the research areas that people are investing resources in. And here is a little picture of our conference from Montreal in 2024, where we introduced this notion of how can we take a person's lived experience and really bring it to life for all of the attendees at the conference. And this is both the Alliance members and also the allied health professionals. And what we did was we booked a suite at the hotel, and we took out all of the standard furniture like the beds and tables and so on, and brought inside to it a range of different technologies and innovations and placed them in and around the suite where people would expect to use them. So, for example, we had all the eating and dining aids in and around the kitchen dining room table. In the area in the bedroom, we had a device which allows a person to control the bed and move and tilt it solely with their eyes. We had hygiene area in the bathroom. We had clothing. We had a range of different smart home devices here, a range of different devices that people can use to support mobility. But what it enabled all the attendees to do was to see firsthand a range of different technologies and solutions that were being recommended, or in some cases suggested that people consider just buying online, for example, but they had found a very important use for it or a very significant use. One of the examples is a cushion, for example, which is often used by women who may be nursing and just making that easier if they're traveling. All of a sudden, that same cushion becomes really useful when a person is in the car, just in providing support and helping them have better posture, for example. And the link at the top will take you to a short video that goes into this in a lot more detail. Also, last year, one of the things that has been in the pipeline with the Alliance is the health literacy map. And you may have seen this at various presentations. I'm sure Martina had this as well, where we sort of split it up into 4 areas to do with understanding ALS, MND, living with it, and then treating it, and then taking action. And the one in particular that I'm focused on from an innovation and technology point of view is living with ALS, MND, and what it means for planning, physical health, mental and emotional health. And in a little bit later, I'll sort of talk to how we've broken these down into more detailed categories. Also, taking Maslow's initial framework that we started to use in 2022, in 2024 and in 2025, we did a lot more work and started to think, well, how could we use this across each of those personas and start to get a better understanding of where they are on their journey and how much of those 8 different dimensions of the model or the framework they may be using, and what could we do to help them be more aware of what else they could consider doing that could have a positive effect on their quality of life. And this then is a really nice sort of segue into our conference in Toronto last year, and Pablo, for example, was able to experience this firsthand. We had a much larger space. We had a whole ballroom. And in the day in the life experience that we put together, we set up different stations to do with home automation, gaming and entertainment, diet and nutrition, clothing, hygiene, intimacy, mobility, respiration. Every aspect of day-to-day living was included in this. So once again, do take the time to just go through the walkthrough. So when it comes to innovation, technology, everyday living, and I guess where a lot of the innovations are taking place and where we as the Alliance are focusing a lot of our attention, we sort of broadly categorize them to do with voice and communication. Obviously, the ability to be able to express yourself is so important to maintain relationships, continue developing those relationships, and to be able to do so in your own voice is such an important factor, both in terms of your self-identity, but also how that voice is then received by the people that you're talking with and living with. Home automation, I've sort of mentioned, and equally for us, the lifestyle category includes expression, whether that's through painting or writing, and productivity as well. And then, of course, every day needs to do with rest, self-care, mobility, and travel as well. And now what I'm going to do is to go into some of the projects or areas that we've been working on in each of these areas. So I mentioned the voice preservation project that we've been doing with Acela in Colombia. And the idea here was to, as I said, take technology which has been around for 15, 20 years in North America, Europe, for example, and look to see, well, how can something like this be made available and accessible and affordable in Colombia to begin with? And working very closely with Acela and with the University Hospital in Bogota, we had access to clinical specialists, neurologists, speech and language therapists, and we adapted that end-to-end experience map and did a more detailed focus into what does it mean for communication, recording and storing a person's voice, and what are the challenges that we need to overcome in terms of infrastructure, affordability, access, and so on. And so we completed this project last year, and the findings are, I think, going to be published in a medical journal later on this year. But you can see some of the materials, the education materials that were produced by the speech and language therapist, to help people understand what voice recording, voice cloning would actually be like, what it would involve, all the way from setting expectations on how it would be recorded, all the way through to helping them make sure that they arrive at the clinic, making sure that when they're doing their voice recording, that they are well hydrated to try and get as natural a voice as possible, and continuing in this area. And this is something which isn't yet public, but Pablo, I hope that in the next few weeks we will be able to send a communication about this. Is we are now working closely with 11 Labs, which is an artificial intelligence voice cloning company, and they've made a commitment to make their technology available to people with ALS, MND, who have a clinical diagnosis, so that they can record their voice and have access to it as and when they want it. So we're in the process of just working that through with 11 Labs, and we hope to be able to communicate that in the next few weeks. But a lot of the motivation from that came from the 12 participants that we were working with in Colombia. And as they started to use the technology, get more familiar with it, and also using some of the apps, whether it's on a mobile device or whether it's on a small tablet, that was helping them communicate. And carrying on this in this area around communication and expression, obviously artificial intelligence over the last years is front and center of everybody's mind. And we've been working very closely with Ossia Voice, which is a small passion project by a developer here in the UK who is using AI to help a person communicate more effectively in a way that sounds more like them in terms of their style of speaking, their expression, by making it easier for them to be able to select phrases or select words or topics of interest and conversation, where AI will generate some prepared statements, and then it's easier for you to just make that selection. Instead of what a lot of current technologies do, you have to select one letter at a time, for example, which makes communication really quite slow. And the one on the right is Talkable, a project that I've been mentoring at the University College London, where the idea here was, if you've got an interface, what can we do to optimize the interface so that a person can make that selection a lot more quickly? A person is able to draw maybe past conversations, so they have some history. So just making it feel a little bit more natural and taking place in real time with the people that you're with. Another big project that we've been working on is the process using AI for enhancing quality of life and helping a person understand where they are on their journey. I talked before about the health literacy map. So one of the things that the health literacy map enabled us to do was to break it down into categories and then subcategories. And in the end, over those 4 main areas, we had 180 items. What I then did was to take those items and map them to each of the different areas of Maslow's model. And we then used this to, with AI, to create and generate a series of prompts and questions that a person could then engage with and start to understand where they are across each one of those 8 different dimensions. And then the AI would also make suggestions or recommendations on something that a person may not have considered, something that they could look into that would be relevant or applicable. So this is in its very early stages yet, and I'm hoping that by the end of this month, we will have a working prototype that we'll share with the community to get a little bit more feedback and input. In the meantime, the students are also collecting as much information from people with lived experience as possible, and I've included the survey that they developed last week. It's available in English, French, and Spanish. So if you get the chance to look at it, then please do take a few minutes to submit it. University College London again, one of the areas that we've been overseeing is motion input, which is designed to take the camera on a phone or on a tablet or a laptop. So instead of requiring a specialist eye tracking device, for example, the idea is that it uses the camera and then either through programming it to detect any head movement, any hand movement, a person is able to, for example, engage in a number of application experiences. Some of these are games, for example, which are available on the Windows Store. And I just wanted to sort of, in the last few minutes, just close with this slide, which is, once again, looking at how can we use this technology and then in many ways review, evaluate and measure the difference it's making to a person's life. And this is an idealized picture, and we hope in the future to be able to say, yes, this is what we've been able to accomplish, because we can see through an person's journey how technology over time across those 8 areas of Maslow's model has helped improve areas of everyday living, and as a result of that, enhance and enrich their quality of life. And here's just a lovely picture that I always sort of finish the session on, is of Norm MacIsaac, who of course Pablo and Pedro know really well, engaging with the virtual reality setup that we had at our conference in Toronto. And now hand over to discussion or questions. Thank you, Pablo.
Thank you, Jarnail. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Very clear, very exciting, and I would say also very comprehensive in terms of the different areas that you covered. Yes, we had the chance to visit the Day in the Life room in Toronto this last December, and it was a great experience. It was a very large room full of the different devices and different things that people living with ALS were able to test there. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about it? How was the process of organizing of putting this day in the life room together, and also what can we expect for the future of that event of the day in the life?
Right, that's a great question. I mean, first of all, it was a great team effort within the Alliance itself, in terms of understanding the room space that we had and how we can get the most out of it, all the way through to working with my colleagues to figure out the layout and how do we make sure that when we had such a large space compared to the suite the year before, how can we make sure that it also feels, it doesn't feel overwhelming, that it feels a little bit natural, a little bit more, a bit homely. So one of the things that we did was we created these big posters, and in the home automation area, for example, we had a big sign, and then we also had pictures to indicate to whether it was a picture of a sofa, or in the diet and nutrition area, we had a picture of kitchens and so on, just so that people could have that association. And we also interspersed it with plants and comfortable seating, so it just felt like, it didn't feel like you were going through an exhibition space, but more like a space where you could clearly see what the area was about, and then also engage and have deeper, meaningful, conversations with the suppliers that we had, the vendors that we had, the volunteers that we had. So yeah, all of those essentially came together to make for, over the 2 days, a really, really intense experience. And because it's all about the lived experience, and we call it in the day in the life of experience space, we want people to be able to get hands-on with the technologies or with the devices, to be able to talk with experts, whether they're occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, clinicians, nutritionists, etc., and try out these technologies. So we saw that picture of Norm with the virtual reality headset. We had Air Canada there with a special almost sort of wheelchair lift that they have that helps them to get a person directly to their seat with minimal sort of physical effort as possible. We had, I think, 5 or 6 different types of wheelchair that you could control either through your eyes, or you could or would do obstacle avoidance, or would be able to go on off-road sort of surfaces and so on. We had, and I don't know, Pablo, whether you tried it or not, in the food and nutrition area, we had sample food where we took pizza or we took an Indian chicken curry, and the nutritionist blended it to get it to a consistency that wouldn't pose a swallowing risk, so that people could see that actually, yeah, okay, it might not look like pizza after it's been blended, but it tastes just like pizza. It tastes just like an Indian curry and so on. So once again, it's about raising awareness, also breaking down barriers about what is possible. And what we're planning this year at the conference in the Netherlands is, and it's a very different space as well. So we have to be very creative and very imaginative in how we bring that to life. So we're also going to be using the outdoor space as well, outside the conference. Some of the things that they have in the Netherlands, for example, are these big cabins that they attach to a person's house, so that once it's then wired and plumbed in, it gives them a separate living space that is purely accessible. Because many houses in the Netherlands have very narrow staircases, or it may be very difficult to get in and out of as well. So this is something in many ways which is quite unique to that country, and we want to be able to showcase that. Equally, with the Netherlands is a big cycling country, so we're going to try and get some cycling adaptive bicycles in there as well that people will be able to try out as well, and hopefully also look at some of the new and emerging technologies such as brain-computer interaction, for example, or artificial intelligence, and look to bring those to life in a more meaningful way.
You almost anticipated my next question. It was going to be about BCI, the brain computer interface, and of course AI, which is the present and the future. They still, especially BCI, it still needs to walk a long way, right? They still have many. We still need to know more about how BCI can help persons with a neurodegenerative disease and progressive disease like ALS. But what I was wondering if you can give us any comment on that.
No, you're absolutely right, and I guess over the last 4 or 5 years in particular, BCI as a technology, as a field, has been around for 15, 20 plus years. And I guess when you look at the advances that are made in the last 4 or 5 years with regards to miniaturization, with regards to artificial intelligence, with regards to new materials and new sensors being developed, etc., often it takes a combination of different technologies to make a concept viable and practical. And I think BCI is a great example of that. Over the last few years, we've seen a range of different approaches, from those which are invasive to those which basically attach electrodes to a person's skull and detect signals that way. Now, I guess each of them have their own reasons for designing and developing the way that they are. And from us, from the Alliance perspective, we'll keep a watching eye on all of these and see how they develop, and where it's appropriate for us to sort of get involved or put a position statement out, then of course we'll do that, because we want to make sure that when it comes to ethics and the responsible use of AI, in particular how it aligns with the fundamental rights, that all of that is reflected in the design and development of the technology as well. So certainly the design, the development of the technology and the way it comes together with different pieces of the puzzle is one part of it. another part of it then is how do we make sure from a governance and from an ethical point of view that this technology is designed and developed in a way that respects an individual person and supports their goals and their objectives for quality of life.
Great. Thank you for that. And pretty much to wrap up, I was going to ask you, of course, you're not familiar with every country's regulation, and it's very different, and it varies a lot around the world. But more in general, if someone from a developing country, from what they call the global south, where usually high technology needs to be imported from abroad, right? What should be the step-by-step process to follow for a person living with ALS since the very first moment they receive a recommendation from their doctors in order to start using some specific assistance for a specific disability? What path should they follow in order to first assess their needs and then finally access that technology?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Pablo. And I guess and a lot of this is obviously born from our experience working with Estella and the Hun in Colombia, working in India, working in Africa as well. And I guess in my mind, I sort of think about it in terms of doing a couple of things in parallel. Obviously, working very closely with your care team, and because they're the ones who, in many ways, are the experts in terms of knowing locally what's available, what's accessible, also what the regulations are from an individual country point of view, what you may be entitled to, what level of support you can expect and you can receive. And we know that in pretty much every country in the world, people face all sorts of hurdles and obstacles and barriers, and it takes a lot of time and effort in order to actually make that happen. It isn't always as simple and straightforward as a very linear step. It does take a lot of effort. Which isn't ideal, particularly with a diagnosis like ALS, MND, where time is of the essence. So certainly working very closely with your healthcare professionals, I think is important. But then equally, doing as much as you possibly can to learn from others, both in your community, but also outside of that community. What's happening in other parts of the world? How have people overcome different challenges, whether they're access to technology, whether they to do with overcoming legal or regulatory obstacles? People have been dealing with these issues for a long time, and there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of expertise, a lot of insight in the community. And I think one of the challenges that we have is how can we tap into that in a more effective way so that people don't feel alone. They feel that sense of support. They feel that sense of the community being behind them. So they feel they have that sense of community behind them. I think this is one of the big challenges that we have. So I guess in parallel to working with your health team is to reach out to as many people within your network, but then also start looking outside of your network. Join local advocacy groups, international advocacy groups, and ask questions. And don't be afraid to say, I don't know this, or I don't know how I can overcome this problem, because chances are somebody would have experienced this before. And what I've sort of seen and witnessed in my experience working with the community over the last 6-7 years is this really, really strong desire that people have to contribute, to give something back, to support each other in whichever way they can.
One thing that we should also take into account is that when we talk about technology, we're not necessarily Sometimes we are, but we are not necessarily always talking about top-notch technology. Sometimes, many times actually, most of the times I would even say, very simple devices can really make a really big difference.
Yes, absolutely, and certainly one of the areas that actually I should have included in the presentation is the role that the open source community is beginning to play in sort of bringing that a step closer, and how innovations in different parts of the world draw inspiration from what they may have seen somebody else do in a different part of the world. We have a lovely example of this last year when we put the experience together in Montreal. We had some occupational therapists from Canada who had shown us it was like the size of a tennis ball, but it had been 3D printed with a hole through it that they could put a pencil in. And it allowed a person who had issues with their grip to be able to grasp the ball and be able to, for example, sign their name. And when we showed that to one of the people that we were working with in India, they shared this wonderful story of how a person had just taken a small potato, drilled a hole, and it was doing exactly the same thing. So I think it just is a perfect example of, you don't need necessarily access to 3D printers or the latest technology. Sometimes if you're aware of the idea and how a person in one part of the world has overcome a constraint, it allows you then to think, well, what could I do as well? And the open source community is a great example of people who are sharing these ideas and making them available and accessible at a very low cost in some cases to everyone.
And that's basically the main role of the International Alliance, is to bring people together from different regions of the world and share knowledge and share information and educate the rest of the people and also curate different information, different pieces of information that can be overwhelming at sometimes for people living with ALS. So thank you very much, Jarnail, for this excellent presentation again. And we are looking forward to hearing more news from the Alliance in terms of the innovation and technology area. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Pablo. It's been my pleasure.
Okay, and the community in Argentina and also the rest of the Spanish-speaking countries, thank you for this presentation. We are sure that this is going to be very useful and very valuable for all of them. So thanks again and take care. Have a great day.
Thank you. All the best then. Bye.